All right, welcome to the next episode, guys. Ben and I are going to talk about, I can't even do it. I don't know if I can call it Boone and Crockett. I call it the Spoon and Crockpot Club.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much what we want to talk about on this episode. I think we should give this a clickbaity title, like "Stop using the Boone and Crockett scoring system" or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, so I can get my membership revoked and they remove my trophy from the from the world records book.
We're going to talk about Boone and Crockett for the average hunter. Like, there's nothing wrong with the Boone and Crockett scoring system. That's not what we're talking about here. But I think we have a really interesting take on it.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to talk about is how people are using the Boone and Crockett system and even skewing it to, like, either show pictures of deer, decide what they're shooting or passing, like stuff like that. So, I mean, where's the best
field judging deer, and then, guesstimating deer, like when they glass or they get trail camera pictures, like all that stuff that goes into this that I think people fuck up, or even just scoring deer in general. I won't throw people under the bus, but people that don't know how to score deer, where they're like, oh, you got to add the tip to tip, or you got to, I shot an 8-pointer. I'm like, I don't get 4 mass measurements, like that type of shit.
That was me last year.
Yeah, I know. So let's rewind this. So what was that? You shot a Kansas deer, and was that the Kansas deer or the Wisconsin buck, where you called me and you're like, yeah, my uncle says you're scoring deer wrong. And I was like, what do you mean? Like,
he never said you were. He just forgot that there was a 4th mass measurement. Finally, he realized, and we got it scored right. But so, yeah, I mean, we won't throw any particular individuals under the bus. But there's some conversations I've had, like going to, like, you meet people at the range, and it's like, oh my God. Like, so I called you last week when I was driving down here, and was just venting about it. And like, the problem with the Boone and Crockett scoring system is the average person has no idea what deer score. And it's become more and more mainstream. And so let's backtrack for a minute. Like I said, 50, 60 years ago, like our grandparents, I don't know if your grandparents hunted or not, but like,
it was always, I shot an 8-pointer, I shot a 10-pointer. It wasn't like, that's a nice 130, that's a 150. Like, that didn't exist.
Yeah, and even like the way my grandpa grew up hunting, like my great grandpa was a trapper up in Exland, Wisconsin. Like, you hunted to get your buck. Like, it could have been a fork, it could have been whatever. And I think by the time that my great grandpa got like, into his 60s and 70s, it got to the point where it was like, okay, you weren't shooting anything smaller than like a 6-pointer, but like you hunted to get your buck. Like, it wasn't, you weren't trying to kill a deer because it was 140 inches or whatever. Fast forward to now, and it's gotten to the point where it's just like, it's so clickbaity or catchy to be like, oh, this buck's a 160, this is a 170. And the problem with that is people have no idea what a 160-inch deer does or doesn't look like. Like, the average person's 160 is a 140 or a 145, and they're using that to, like, I had somebody showing me pictures a little while back, and they're like, okay, yeah, this buck's like a 130. And I'm like, that buck's 115 inches.
Yeah.
Like, maybe. Like, and you're using this system to determine what you're going to shoot or pass when you have no idea how the system works. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that's what I was going to dive into to bring people back in the loop here. So the system's not just like, I'm not specifically talking about the Boone and Crockett. You can print it off online that shows you how to score a deer. Like, if you want to get good at judging deer and like having these conversations like we are, like, oh, that's 130, you physically need to score deer yourself, so you have references. That's the problem. Like, all these people online are seeing a picture of some guy that's like, oh, I got a nice 150 on camera. Well, that stays in their brain, and then they get a picture of a deer that looks similar, but it one could be missing tine length, could be missing mass, or could be missing width, beam length, all that stuff. And they're still like, okay, that deer was close enough to this deer in size. So I'm guessing it's around, it's 150, even though it's like, okay, it's 126 inch, 10 point or whatever. Like it's just sprouting its crab claws. And it's interesting to me, I used to be like that. Now I have a variety of deer on the wall, right? I got, I've shot half dozen deer between 100 and 115 inches. I have 4 on the wall right now that are between 128 and 135. So like that's the easiest for me to judge. When I see a picture, I'm like, that's a 130s class deer, whether it's a 10 point or it's an 8. If it's an 8, but it has the frame to be a 130, then you go from there. I also have a 187 inch deer on the wall. So that's really helped me a lot when people are like, oh man, like how big is this buck? Like, I can reference because one, I've scored it. I had it scored by Chad Collins in the Minnesota Measurers Club, and he taught me how to field judge deer, like how the Boone and Crockett Club recommends that, like, while you're out hunting in the woods and you see a deer, like how to give yourself the class of deer. And when I say class, I'm talking like erase the third digit, like you're talking 130s, 140s, 150s, 160s, 170s, so on and so forth. And it was really good information to like, how to judge that.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, I mean, like I said, you're using a skewed system or not a skewed, the system isn't skewed. Your perception of the system is skewed to determine
Correct.
how you're going to shoot past a deer. And,
all right.
I just lost my train of thought. Wow. That's not good. Getting old.
Well, that system flaws people, right? So there's a mix of hunters in the hunting community right now that, instead of looking at the maturity of a deer, like you could have a 6.5-year-old 8-pointer that's only going to score 130 inches, especially if he's in, my neck of the woods up here. They just get mass. They don't grow tine length. Maybe they just don't sprout a whole lot, but they're an old deer. Versus, a little far south of me, you could have a 2-year-old that's 130, and guys are like, oh, I'm going to shoot the 130, or maybe it's 3-year-old and it's 140. I'm going to shoot the 140 because it scores better than this deer. I'm like, that deer's only 3 years old or 2.5 years old versus like, this deer in this example, is 5.5, 6 years old. Sure, he doesn't score as well, but I'm like, the more mature deer, he's probably the harder deer to kill.
Yeah. Well, and I remember my point now, like, unless you're consistently killing deer year after year and having them scored or know how to score within, a couple inches of like less than 5 inches of what somebody official would score it, like you have no clue what deer are going to score. I mean, when that guy taught you how to field score deer, what was arguably probably as important as that is you have a bunch of deer on the wall that you've scored or had scored that you like, what they score. You know what I mean? You have a ton of reference points to that system that help you. And like I said, you've got people coming up and they're like, well, this deer's a 125, so I'm not going to shoot it. Well, no, that deer's a 110, and it's like, you don't even know shoot what makes you happy. I guess that's my whole argument behind this. And if you want to be like a trophy hunter, fuck what it scores, shoot the most mature deer in the area. That's going to be the hardest deer to kill. That, in my opinion, makes it the biggest trophy. You know what I mean? Like, I would love to shoot a 180-inch deer someday. Absolutely. Like, that's a bucket list item for me. Yeah, it's cool to have them scored. I had my Kansas buck scored. But, like, if you truly want the best trophy in the woods, go off age class of the deer. A 6.5-year-old that scores 140 is probably a lot harder to kill than a 4.5-year-old that scores 170,
Yeah. And there is, Grant, I've talked to my boss about this actually. Like, I grew up with like, you see a smaller buck. Okay, that's a 1.5-year-old. That one's a 2-year-old. That one's a 3.5-year-old based off rack size is the way my family's done it. And I still catch myself doing that. More and more so now. It's like, I get in those conversations with my boss. Like, you really don't know how old the deer is until you kill it and you get it aged. But there's signs, right? When you look at a deer, if it's lanky, it doesn't have belly sag, it doesn't have a dip in the back, like, it's going to be, 2 years old or less. A 1.5-year-old deer is so easy to spot out. You can tell by body size, by the antler growth. 2-year-olds is kind of similar. After 3.5, like between 3 and like 6, that's where guys are like, oh, I can't tell if it's 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. But there are, like, once you start seeing those deer, it's the same thing, same point I'm trying to make with like me referencing deer I've shot, right? After you shoot a couple and you look at, how big they are, how their bodies are, even just the way they act in the woods. Like a big deer is always more meticulous. You know how many retarded 1.5-year-old bucks I've had that are just like, oh, there's a guy in the tree.
Yeah.
Oh, corn, let's go. Like,
I feel like up to 3.5, it's like a 1.5 to 2.5-year-old's distinguishable. 2.5 to 3.5 pretty distinguishable, and 3.5 to anything else, like 3.5 to 4.5 is distinguishable. 3.5 to 5.5 is distinguishable. But it's like once they get to 4, that's when it gets hard for me.
Yeah, unless you have history with deer where guys are like, oh, I had them on camera last year. I found the sheds, same genetics, compare pictures. Like that's how guys are really keeping, when they shoot a deer and, they got their trophy photo with, 2 years of sheds prior. They're like, oh, he's 6.5. Like, yes, those are guys that legitimately probably know their deer's age, and it's a little bit different.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. It's trying to think of where else we can go with this. It's just a tough.
The actual process for scoring deer. So let me lay this out to all you guys that think you know how to score deer. So regardless of the deer, unless it's
all right,
from 8-pointers on, we'll go with that, right? So you get each side of the rack. You get a left, you get a right. You always get 4 mass measurements. Doesn't matter if it's an 8-pointer, doesn't matter if it's a 35-pointer. You get 4 mass measurements. It starts at the base below the brow tine, goes up from there in between points, wherever you can measure that. You get the tine length of each tine. You get the beam length of each beam. And then you get the inside spread, which is the widest point on the inside of the rack. What Boone and Crockett asked for on the sheet, just for documentation, is the outside spread. They ask you from the outside of the rack, what's the widest point? And then they want a tip-to-tip spread. So I'll throw someone under the bus. My roommate Kyler, when we lived in Missouri, I was scoring my non-typical weird buck, trying to figure out how it scores. And I got the measurements, and then, he was going through the sheet, and he's like, oh, you need the tip-to-tip, you need the widest point. And he adds it up, and he's trying to tell me this deer's 150 inches. He's going crazy. I'm like, no, like this. Now he's like, what do you mean? Like, you always get a tip-to-tip at least. And I'm like, no. I'm like, they asked for that information, but the only thing that goes into scoring deer are the combined beam lengths, the combined tine lengths, the 4 mass measurements on each side, and then the inside spread. Yeah. Those 4 things. And that makes up every deer on the planet. Then if you're really going into it, gross versus net score, like typical, what they do with net is you add up both sides. Whatever the difference is, like between each measurement, you have to subtract those deductions because they want it typical. They want to average everything out to be the same. And if it's not, you lose that. So that's why my Booner as a typical was 186 and 7/8. And it ended up netting 173 and 2/8. So it's like, okay, I lost over 10 plus inches just because he had, a 5 on one side versus the other one didn't have a G5. He also had a kicker on that same side that was 2.5 inches, so I lost that. But nets are for fish. That's what I think. So just go based on the green score, unless you're truly.
All right.
And that's the other thing with this system, right? Is then you get on these Facebook groups and guys are like, oh yeah, that's a 150, and some guys like, no, that's only a 140. He won't net 150. He'll be 140. I'm like, you guys seriously arguing over a picture of like the gross score versus the net score, and that's going to decide whether or not you shoot that deer because he'll gross high, but he's not going to net good. Like if you're that into it, that deep into it, like you have lost something with this sport and this lifestyle that I just feel bad for. Like if you're seriously basing it on, the net versus the gross, like something's fucked with your head.
Yeah, no, and there's like,
all right.
I saw a post today on Facebook of a guy, trail camera pictures. It was a mainframe 8, And granted, it had some trash. It was a big buck. I mean,
Yeah.
he was probably close to 150, maybe 150 inch 8-pointer. I mean, this is a big mature buck. And the guy posts and he's like,
All right.
I had this deer on camera last year. He blew up this year. Like, something along those lines. Like, what do you guys think? Does he go 160 or 170?
Yeah.
And like everybody in the comments is like, that's a 150 inch deer. That's a 160 inch deer. Like, yeah, he's probably 145 to 150. Like, for reference, granted, my buck didn't have any trash. I shot an 8-pointer last year with a 21 2/8 inch inside spread.
Yep.
His
All right.
main beams
All right.
were 23 3/8 inches.
Yep. Those are good.
And he scored 128 1/8 inch gross.
All right.
Now, like I said, I don't care what he scored. I shot him because I was excited to shoot him, and like he's a trophy to me. But it is
So you
sometimes.
have a legit number now and a legit reference where you're like, okay, I know like what that deer scores in comparison to other deer.
Yeah. Now, granted, like I said, he wasn't the most mass heavy, but I mean, as far as width and like main beam length, like you're not going to get a whole lot better than that deer was, and he didn't even go 130 inches. Like I said, he's an 8, so you lose quite a bit of other points that could be scored, but and mass is a big one that helps you. But yeah, I mean, it's
All right. All right.
That's actually a good thing to bring up because that's the other thing people don't realize. Like, I talk to a lot. It seems to be the older generation when they're talking about scoring deer. They're like, oh, but man, this deer is wide.
Yeah.
If you were to rank
that much because it's only one measure.
That's what I'm saying. If you were to rank your like what adds up a score, it is first time length, it is second mass, third it is beam length because you get 2 of those measurements.
Yep.
Last it is width, like whether your deer's 16 inches inside or 22 inches inside. Guess the difference. If they have the same points and the same mass, but that deer, let's say 2 deer, the exact same time length, the exact same mass measurements, exact same beam measurements, but you have one with 16-inch spread and one with a 22-inch spread. What's the difference? It's
All right.
8 and 6 inches, between whatever. Like that doesn't add up compared to like if your mass measurements are 3 inches around versus all 4 of your mass measurements are like 5.5 or 5 1/4, like that adds up like real quick.
If you gain half an inch on all 8 of your mass measurements, you gain 4 inches. Where if you gain 2 inches of inside spread, you're only gaining those 2 inches.
Yeah, and that's a lot of people misconceive that because they'll look at a deer and be like, wow, he's just super wide, and like, okay, like, yeah, it's cool. Like, I'd love to shoot a super wide deer, but I'm like, it doesn't. I mean, you're not changing the class of deer. Whether your deer, if you have a 130-inch deer with a 16-inch spread, and that deer grows again to a 20-inch spread, you still have a 30s class deer. It doesn't all of a sudden make it a 140s because he's wider. Like that just doesn't ever add up.
I can tell you firsthand, it's cool to shoot a buck like that. Like bucks with a lot of character, I always think are cool. And so like kill a deer like that is cool. But like if you want something that scores out super well, like width is not how you do it.
Yep.
So.
So Boone and Crockpot Club, what I kind of want to vent about we did on the last episode is fucking archery range etiquette. So backstory, yesterday I went to the range.
All right.
And
you started shooting. I got to get some water. About to pass out.
So I get to the range and I want to screw on I brought a 3-pack Grim Reaper broadheads, the mechanicals, and they send a practice tip, but it had come apart, so I had to like fuck around for 15 minutes trying to figure out how to install the blades and lock them up and blah blah blah. So meanwhile, some other dude's shooting. I finally get around to like 6 arrows off at 30 yards. It wasn't super great. Then the guy comes over and he starts talking to me. So there again, I'm like, I've been there for 20 minutes, only shot 6 arrows or whatever it was, maybe less than that. And the guy comes over and talks to me. He's like, yeah, I saw you here filming the other night. I'm like, yeah, I was trying to slow-mo film my arrow flight so I could see how they were spinning and how the arrow was flying. And he was kind of, into that. He's like, oh, that's cool. He's like, are you practicing? Like, you got a season coming up soon? And I said, yep, I'm going on a mule deer hunt to North Dakota, leaving, in a week and a half. And he's like, oh, same. I drew at any deer tag. I'll be out there. So him and I started shooting the bull, and it's actually a good conversation because we're not going to be in the same area, but we're going for the same thing. He's practicing for that trip. I'm practicing for that trip. We talked for another 10, 15 minutes. So mind you, I'm now at the range for almost 45 minutes, and I've only got 6 arrows off. So all of a sudden I hear in the parking lot, like, it didn't happen like this, but I'm just going to say, like, the tires squealing, they pull in, like, the bass is bumping, like, and I'm like, oh, we got, other people here. And the guy looks at me and he's like, I'm going to get out of here. Those 2 rascals were here earlier and I can't take it. And I'm like, oh, well, see ya. So out comes 2 younger than 20, older than 15, that type of age class. And it's like fucking Beavis and Butthead, dude. Like, have you ever seen that where they're like, like, that's what they were doing, like poking each other. The one kid comes up, and he's like Goldilocks, and he's like, I don't know if he's acoustic or restarted, but he was like, bang, 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 like making noises like that. I'm like, all right, like at this point, I'm shooting, listening to that, not concentrating, shooting at 60, didn't do very good. Went and pulled the arrows. Then I come back and the guy's like, oh man, what kind of bow is that? Like, what kind of, like, oh, what are you shooting? Blah, blah, blah. So I start talking to him, like, whatever. So I pull back and I shoot one at 60, and I didn't miss, but it was like a foot right and a little bit high where I was trying to aim at. And the kid next to me draws back. So I load another arrow. I draw back. I'm aiming. All of a sudden I look and I see a freaking lighted knock go and smoke the arrow at 60 that I just shot. Like hit the fletching. It didn't break the arrow, whatever. But I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, you show up and you shoot at the same guy. Like, there's 25 different targets at this range. There's other targets at 60 you could shoot at. So I shoot my arrow, and then he launches his whole quiver. Like, he shoots 4 arrows. I shoot like 5. Him and I are walking up. Like, we're not talking to each other. He didn't acknowledge that I was shooting at the target. I'm like, fuck this kid. I ain't talking to him. So that's when I took the Snapchat. And he was sitting there walking and doing that same shit. Like, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I have Tourette's, but this kid had something, dude. Like, he was like fucking on one. And then also, like, and he had a good group. I mean, it wasn't where he was trying to hit, but he had a good group. And like, we have arrows touching. Like, I pulled mine out, and he's like, oh, are you shooting the new Ultra View arrows? Like, those look sick. I'm like, no, and these are my, VAP TKOs, but they're still pretty expensive, and you ended up hitting one. And he's like, oh, like, brushed it off, didn't. So whatever. So then I'm like, I'm going to shoot at 50. So I shoot around at 50. He's still shooting at the 60 target. I'm like, all right, avoiding these guys. Pull our arrows. Him and his buddy go up to the deck, because at the Rice Lake Archery Park, there's that upper deck where you can shoot elevated. All right. I launch an arrow at 50. And all of a sudden, again, frick, another arrow, boom, goes and smokes the same target I'm shooting at. And I'm like, what in the fuck? So he did it the next 2 groups. Like, I don't know if he was like trying to get me to leave the range, or if he was just that stupid where like he just didn't know range etiquette. But in my humble opinion, showing up to the range and shooting at a target that somebody else is already shooting at is the equivalent of me going to a public restroom with 7 or 8 urinals in a line. I'm pissing in one urinal, and you come up and you start pissing in the same fucking urinal. Like, that's like that should be grounds for a fight. Like, I should have full-heartedly been able to go and deck this kid, but at the same time, it's like, okay, if he's 16 or 17, like, I'm not going to jail over that. I don't bark no bite, but I'm like, come on, like, is that not a thing anymore? Like, who does that? And the worst thing about it is that I feel like I almost wasted my reps, because I was so concentrated on what was going on around me that I couldn't function or focus on like my reps, what I needed to work on, because at the moment I'm struggling, and that didn't help me at all. So I almost feel like yesterday was just a waste. So I ended up leaving the range, and, I shot 60 arrows, and I'm like, I think 40 of those arrows I was competing at the same target with some dude.
Yeah. So moral of the story is, don't be a douche.
Yeah, don't be a douche. If like, that brings me to the whole point of like why I wish there was a license to breed. Like, that person's parents, like, dude, Like, there was limited fucking brain cells. Like, when I tell you that kid was cooking on like 4 or 5 individual brain cells, like that was it. And he wasn't like necessarily a bad shot, but then his buddy was struggling, and his buddy was like missing the target at 30 yards, and they were, telling me the story about, him buying this used boa shields and like blah blah blah, and they were trying to sight it in, and then it was just like,
All right.
I don't know. Maybe that means I'm getting old, because I feel like I was a hooligan. I still like to be a hooligan, especially at that age. I did dumb shit, but I made sure to not do it in a public place, like around
Yeah,
people
you don't
that
do it.
I might affect. Like if I'm with my buddies, yeah, I'll go do hood rat shit. But in a public place where other people are trying to focus and like, I don't know. That was just it floored me. So if you're gonna go shoot at a public range, make sure you have some fucking decency.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, before we wrap it up, I'd like to say thank you to our sponsors, which is absolutely fucking nobody. So if anybody wants to sponsor us, that would be a great time.
Yeah, throw some cash. We'll shout you out on the podcast. We at least have like 7 listeners that would for sure probably, buy your stuff, especially if you pitched us like a couple $1,000 a piece.
Yeah. Yeah. We'd probably buy your stuff. Probably.
So the next episode that you guys are going to hear is going to be after my North Dakota trip, and we'll kind of swing back into actual post-hunt clarity, right? Not post-nut clarity, but post-hunt clarity. So I'm going to have a trip with my dad. It's going to be a week in the heat chasing mule deer. So I'm sure I will have plenty to talk about, whether that be a harvest story and how I did it, or how I fucked up and how I wish I could go back and redo it. But one of the two, there'll be a good episode that you guys can tune in on. And there may possibly be, Ben may have sat in the woods once or twice at that point too in Kentucky. So
we'll see. Are you and your dad gonna kiss if you kill one?
No, I'll probably hug him big time, but I dap him up a little bit, but
no kissing.
No, I might give him a kiss on the cheek, but we'll see. So I'm excited. I've never been on a hunting trip with my dad other than Minnesota, and that's not like what I consider like a hunting trip. Like I had to be stuck with just my dad in the middle of nowhere for a week. Like that's gonna be interesting,
Yeah, well, that'll be fun.
So I'm excited for it. But all right, guys, tune in next time, and hopefully we have something good to talk about.